Aloha and good morning from Hawaii. My name is Jürgen Steinmetz and I'm joining you from the World Tourism Network in cooperation with eTurbo News. Those that are watching us live right now on the eTurbo News screen or in any of our partner publications, welcome. Those that are part of the audience, welcome. And we have a great audience of speakers today. And we're going to be talking about the biggest event, at least here in our state in Hawaii. These are the terrifying fires we had on the island of Maui. Just to give you an update on this, in Maui, the situation, of course, remains serious. There are many people displaced. The number of casualties was lowered to 95, I believe, or 96. What I guess is good news. I'm just wondering how could we have a higher number, and they came back to life. But you can see there is a lot of
Very good.
confusion, but it's good news. Now, hotels in West Maui, and this is of course part of our business, travel and tourism, are supposed to reopen on October 8th. Right now, they're hosting mostly local residents that were misplaced. And there is an organization in Lahaina actually protesting against reopening of tourism in West Maui and said we still also need the space in the hotels for our own people. So that is an ongoing discussion, but HTA and authorities here in Hawaii are determined to reopen tourism in West Maui. And this is really some of the subjects I hope our excellent team of panelists can also discuss. It appears to me when this happened, and immediately after this happened, of course, global news was all over the story. It was a big story and it was a terrible story. But I think authorities here really forgot who they were talking to. Used to talk to local media, and it usually stays locally. They forgot there's going to be Al Jazeera, there's CNN, there is DWTV. Everyone in the world is here. And when they came out with a statement to ask tourists to stay home and ask people to leave the island of Maui, and we had hundreds and thousands of people arriving here in Honolulu, and I was here at the convention center where they opened shelter space for tourists because they thought there wouldn't be enough hotel rooms. All of this may have not been necessary. Fortunately, the region affected was West Maui, and 37 or close to 40% of the hotel space is in that area. And obviously, you don't want tourists in an area what is in a disaster zone. But the rest of Maui was fine, and certainly the rest of the other islands were completely okay. But there was a run on leaving Hawaii as a state. There was not one seat on any Hawaii airport to go anywhere in the world. Everything was sold out, long waiting lists. People are fighting to get to the airport. And it was like a panic run to leave the state, what was completely unnecessary. And when authorities kind of caught up with this and say, oh no, everything else is safe, it may have been too late at that point to really understand what is going on. So now there's a lot of damage control. Our governor is in New York. He just spoke at the environmental event at the United Nations. Statements are clear. Hawaii is open for tourism business. On the other hand, we're dealing with a crisis we have never dealt before. The world is helping, FEMA is helping, but also interest of local Hawaiians are becoming more and more important in the decision-making progress, and specifically with a changed leadership in the Hawaii Tourism Authority that had been putting the land and the culture and the local people quite a bit in the forefront compared to tourism and economic interests. This is somehow a little bit clashing here. But right now, tourism, except for West Maui, runs normally. Our numbers are down a little bit from what I understand, but hopefully they're coming back. We have something magically here, what's called Aloha, the Aloha spirit. So this is a short overview, but I wanted to welcome all of you again to the session. The session is by the World Tourism Network. It's for our members. And those that are watching us and know about World Tourism Network, we are an organization that was launched during the COVID crisis on the sideline of a canceled ITB trade show in Berlin, Germany. And we have grown now as an organization to members, a little bit more than 1,400 members in 133 countries. So we're very excited. We have our own first global summit in Bali, Indonesia. Those that happen to be in the area or still wanted to attend, you're welcome. Just go to time2023.com. You can still register. And it's going to be an excellent event. We also have excellent speakers there and a presentation. World Tourism Network is all about the small and medium-sized enterprises and businesses in the world. So our goal is really to get SMEs on the table with the larger private sectors, the Marriotts and the Hyatts of this world, and the public sector, like government, tourism ministers. And we've been successful to get good participation both on the private sector within our core audience, the SMEs, but also in the public sector, like Montenegro joined us, Jamaica, and so forth. We will hear later on from Jamaica from the Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, and we've been partnering with them in Bali, and actually we'll be opening our first or their first crisis center in the ASEAN region. Now, I got 2 minutes, and this is basically for everyone. We have very little time, so every speaker has 10 minutes altogether to present. We're going to have a short Q&A, but this is not the end of it. We're going to be rebroadcasting this event live many times over and over, and so we get a lot of people tuning in eventually. We're going to open up for more questions, and we're going to make it part of our WTN advocacy initiatives. So we're going to hear a lot more. So the people here, you're just the pioneers here initiating the discussion, and it's important discussion. Now, David, I don't know if you still want me to introduce the speakers today real quick, or should we skip this and go one by one?
I think we'll go one by one.
David is the main guy behind it. It's not me. He organized this, David Beirman in Australia. So I'm going to ask him.
Yeah. So I think we'll go one by one. So our first speaker, obviously after you, Jürgen, is the distinguished Erin Ketter from Israel. Erin, I can give a little bit of background for Erin. Erin is a person who's done some extraordinary work, particularly writing about tourism and the media, and also about media marketing and image. So, Erin, it's great to have you, and you're still with Kinneret College, aren't you? So,
yeah, no, Erin and I, we met actually in Nepal. And
right. Yeah,
great guy. Around. Yes, I was quite impressed, and I wanted to, Erin, real quick on the sideline, but the reason I didn't follow through in Bali is because we didn't have the airline sponsors, so we couldn't technically make it work, but definitely we're looking forward working with you in the future. And we have Pankaj joining us actually here on this event a little bit later from Nepal. Thank you, Erin. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jürgen and David. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm not sure if I should say today, tonight, tomorrow. Maybe I should just say aloha, right? It covers 24/7, all time zones. So aloha, everyone. As David mentioned, I'm a tourism researcher and professional. I have a hybrid background. I wrote and I researched about tourism crisis, and also in the last few years I've been working very closely with the UNWTO, European Travel Commission, Toute France, and other world-class tourism organizations on several topics, including recovery from a crisis you might heard of called COVID-19. So I'll try to bring some of my crisis experience to the table and to the very short time we have. So I think the main question I have on my agenda for today is how to bounce back. Maui has experienced a terrible natural disaster, but thank God the fire is out, and now we're moving from the crisis management stage into the coping stage into the recovery stage. And of course, with all the challenges that Jürgen was mentioning with the local population, so of course, we want to see how we bounce back as fast and as effectively as possible. We need to remember that the physical crisis has ended. So the island of Maui is now safe. Hotels are theoretically can be open tomorrow morning. Infrastructure is working and so forth. Airport is open. However, we still see that hotels are not working full capacity or will not work in full capacity in the coming week. And we still have this image crisis that's going to follow us for weeks, for even months. And our question is to how to bounce back. And I'm going to briefly present 3 media strategies, marketing strategy to bounce back fast and efficiently. First of all, something that David Beirman is, I think, was one of the strategies behind it, is the strategy of reducing the crisis scale. If you were watching CNN during the time of the fire, so you could imagine that all the islands of Hawaii were under fire and that nothing left out of Hawaii. And we can go into the strategy of reducing the crisis scale, limiting the crisis, saying, okay, it's not that entire Hawaii destroyed, but Hawaii has many islands. Only one of them was affected, not the entire island, but just a certain region of Maui. And by limiting and reducing the scale of the crisis, you actually convey a message of business as usual for the other, 80, 90% of the territory of Hawaii. In the case of Nepal, they did it in a very creative way. Tourists who were in Nepal immediately following the earthquake, or even during the time of the earthquake, were handed out with this kind of postcard, I'm in Nepal now, with the hashtag Nepal now, and they were asked to share this image in social media, saying to their friends, hey, we're in Nepal now, we're having a great time, it's not all ruins as you might have imagined, come and join us. And through that, Maui and Hawaii can kind of convey the message that most of Hawaii is still unaffected and that tourism is reopen or back to business. So that's the first strategy. A second strategy, and that put us directly in the field of fire, is a strategy that was put in place in Glacier National Park in the US regarding splitting liabilities into assets. Glacier National Park every few years unfortunately suffered from severe forest wildfire. And one of the strategies they've done through the years is to rebrand or reposition the fire. And instead of fire equals a disaster, so they design a new equation, meaning that fire is a natural process in which the forest regenerates itself. And through that, they were saying, okay, we're not going to attract the same target audience. We're going to look at the sustainable eco-travel market and going to allow them to see how the forest regenerates itself. So in that case, we're going to rebrand this area of Maui that was affected, say, okay, we have here a natural process. You can see how the forest, the natural forest in Maui, in Hawaii, regrows. You can better understand the nature, the ecology. You can come into a place that feels natural again, that doesn't have a million tourists, that's natural, that's unique, that has something that's very, let's say, very live, very authentic charm to the story, and create new products for new audiences. And that would be like the quiet, eco, sustainable, natural spot within Hawaii that wasn't yet captured by all the tourists. So that's a second strategy or a second angle to consider. A third strategy to consider is of patriotism. We saw it in few disasters in the United States specifically, either following 9/11 or in this slide, following the Vegas mass shooting back in 2017, the use of patriotic feeling, national feeling, saying to the people of the United States, this is one of the worst natural disaster, worst wildfire in the history of the United States. Come show your love, come show your support, come be part in the recovery. Don't just put emojis of heart, but put your heart or put your wallet where your heart is and come be part of Hawaii, come plant a tree, come support the local economy, come and participate in the wonder or in the magic of rebuilding Hawaii and rebuilding Maui and recreating the unique aloha magic of Hawaii. So to conclude, these are 3 strategies, all been proven, all been used by destinations that were facing crisis in order to recover from this crisis, and using one of these strategies or a combination of these 3 strategies might support Maui in bouncing back in fast and efficient manner and minimizing the image damage and the economic damage to Hawaii and to Maui following the wildfires. I think that was absolutely 7 minutes, David.
No, that's wonderful. Wonderful. Aaron, thank you very much for participating. And we're going to go to Bert Walbeck. So David, introduce Bert, please.
Oh, yeah, with pleasure. Firstly, thank you very much, Aaron. Bert van Walbeck is well known to a lot of people, particularly in the Asia Pacific area, as a master of disaster. And Bert has been involved in really helping to deal with crises as varied as the Indian Ocean tsunami, which of course hit Thailand as well as many other countries, the Thai floods of 2011. Bert and I actually worked together to produce a book called Bounce Back, which became the Pacific Asia Travel Association's Bible of risk, crisis and recovery. Of course, it was replaced had to be rewritten after COVID by Parta. But Bert has a tremendous record of over 30 years of dealing with tourism risks, crises and disasters. I think one of the most important projects he was involved in, he was the chair of Parta's task force to revive Nepal after the Nepal earthquake of 2015. He's still teaching, he's still active, and I'd rather that we heard from Bert rather than from me. So Bert, over to you. And could I ask other people who aren't speaking to turn their mics off, if you could be so kind? I'm just going to do that too.
Okay, thank you, David, and also thank you, Aaron. I am in Nepal now. Was one of the most cost-effective campaigns that I have ever been part of. It was simply printing a few sheets, giving it to every tourist and ask them to handle that and to post that wherever they could. So let's start with the bottom line of what I wanted to say. It is not what you do after the crisis, but what you plan before the crisis. What should have done before is invest in proactive operation and communication planning. Macau did that after the various crises at the beginning of the century and invested more than $2 million in a crisis center in which I had the pleasure of working very closely during 8 years, getting that organized, getting that planned from zero to a big crisis center. And it is then overcoming the "it won't happen to us" executive thinking. Communication plans need to be discussed before, not during the crisis. Social and traditional media plans and people in charge that can take charge during the crisis appointed way before. A dark website which can be activated within a few minutes. Spreading the news, updating the news, and working with three-dimensional communication. What are you sending and what is being received? Are you verbal or non-verbal? What is the content? How emotional that should be? And once again, before the crisis, simulate, simulate, and simulate. During one of the simulations we did in Macau, one of the highest ranking officials that was part of that simulation made a mistake and said something that would have cost him the job if this would have been happening in a real situation. So again, be prepared before anything else. And then it's a matter of managing perception. As Aaron said already, Hawaiian wildfires, as you can see on the map before, Hawaii was not burning. Maui was not burning. There were a few areas, serious enough, that were burning. But there's managing the perception of what, unfortunately, the press always likes to highlight. The better the crisis, the better the negatives, the more people will look, will click, increase the ratings. So putting the crisis into a perspective during the crisis is something that needs to be, again, discussed, trained before. And then after the crisis, and that's what we did in Nepal, we made recovery the story. It's a great period of time. It's inspiration. Change is happening. And by putting less pictures of the devastation and highlighting the energy of the recovery with human stories of reliance, we got a lot of attention, and that helped a lot. What we also should do is stop blaming the climate change. Again, I see it's climate change, climate change, climate change. We should talk about infrastructure. We should talk about lessons learned, zoning, forest management, and in Hawaii or in Maui, the burying of the power lines. It is that prime message that we have to send out. We are open for business. And whatever the press says, we have to encounter that. Give travelers a chance to be part of the reclaim, as I am in Nepal now. Run a YouTube sharing competition where the participants can win something. Give bloggers, the community, the information, and make the most of celebrity visits. The visit of David Beckham in Nepal was a bigger success than any other VIP that came there. So what should be done during or post-crisis? Work with film trips. In Egypt, after the Gulf War, we did a US $99 fem trip for travel agents, travel consultants all over Europe. And in 3 months, we had over 3,000 travel consultants coming to Egypt and then going back and telling the world. Work with newsletters on the road, develop series of positive articles for lifestyle and newspapers, and broadcast new, fresh commercials. So rather than focusing only on the idea that things are going back to normal, that things are bouncing back. And again, that is the booklet David and I wrote in 2011 for PATA, which is still being used by many organizations, where we write in much more detail, as I can tell you today, what can be done and what should be done. It is accentuating the positive and eliminating the negatives. Please remember, it's not over when it's over. Yes, Hawaii, Maui is out of the news. We have Marrakesh, we have other destinations. We have the fires increase. It's all over. But what has to be done in a situation is that we keep the story of the recovery in the news. And I know it's difficult to sell positive news, but it's not over when it's over. You will have to push a long time and a lot more address the recovery, because it will take time for people to get rid of these pictures of Maui burning and of course Lahaina burning, and it will take time. But coming back to my bottom line, it's not what you do after the crisis, it's what you plan before. And I hope that this will be a lesson that Hawaii has learned now too.
I was telling Bert that World Tourism Network is opening our chapter in Nepal next week, and we would invite him to be a guest with Pankaj and Deepak. I'm sure he knows. And we're welcoming now Richard Gordon. Professor Richard Gordon he's the director of the University of Bournemouth in the Center of Disaster Management, joining us from the United Kingdom. Good evening, sir, and thank you very much for joining us. And the next 10 minutes are yours.
Thank you very much indeed. I've even set a little timer to go off when my time is over. So let me just make sure, let me just make sure I've got my slides shared properly.
Yeah, your slide was visible, but now I think it's turned off.
Yeah, there we go. That's it there. So in these short minutes I have with you, I was trying to work out what's the key message I want to bring across as a university that studies disaster management, and much of our time is spent working with national governments and their disaster management agencies. And it's been a privilege working with people like Bruce and David and others, in fact, several others who I've seen online, where we've been brought into the world of travel and tourism. And I remember working on a particular project and discovering that the world of travel and tourism is faced with exactly the same problem as the world of disaster management. It's finding a voice. Where is the voice of tourism in governance? Where is the voice of disaster management? Because the problem that we face is that whether it's a pandemic or an earthquake or a fire or a transportation accident, there are government ministries, all who have a stake in one aspect of it. So where does tourism naturally find its voice? In the same way, where does disaster management find it? Now, from a disaster management point of view, it's very simple to say, well, why don't we put disaster management into a ministry? And then they will have a voice. But one ministry will not get the sheer scope of resilience required for disaster management if it's only in one ministry, because actually it needs to be embedded in the thinking of every ministry. So does tourism. The aims and objectives of national tourism agendas needs to be understood and embedded within every ministry. And indeed, in many cases, the key role of a tourism ministry may be restricted more to the marketing and advertising and sales aspects, as opposed to ensuring that the tourism experience is one in which the infrastructure is safe, the well-being is safe, and the transportation is safe. These are critical issues of tourism in terms of risk reduction. It gets even more difficult for disaster management if the agency ends up being subordinate to a ministry. Now they not only have to ask for permission to speak, but even then they can't even speak across ministries. They are limited to what their voice is. And in some cases, as in my own country, tourism is so often an agency within a ministry, and its voice is muted as a result of that. So one of the things we've been finding increasingly interesting is to see how tourism can find a voice within what we might call policy domains. Transportation crosses multiple ministries, even though you may have a Ministry of Transport. To cover all the aspects of transportation will require a domain of ministries. And so transportation is a place in which, as a domain, tourism could find its voice. Similarly, the well-being of our tourists, making sure that the food that they eat is there, making sure that the entertainment is there, that the health facilities are there, and so on, that the places where they stay are there. So all the well-being aspects of tourism crosses multiple ministries. It's a domain. And there again, tourism can find a voice. And then again with infrastructure, bridges, roads, the structures that we depend upon, the buildings and so on, the places of entertainment, all of these are places where tourism needs to know that the infrastructure is sound. It's a domain, and tourism there can find a voice. I'll come back to this at the very end of this little talk. So what I'm suggesting is tourism, like disaster management, has to embed itself in multiple ministerial type activity, which we might call domains. Some governments have called them things like delivery units and so on. When we move to response, it becomes even more important, and our previous two speakers have made this abundantly clear. If, for example, I look at one particular aspect that will inevitably come from any major incident or disaster going on in a country, people at home are looking at their televisions, they're seeing the fires or the floods or the earthquakes, they're seeing the numbers that are appearing on the screen, and they're thinking, who do I phone? I think my brother is there, my father is on holiday there, my friends are there, who do I phone? And of course, there are multiple phone calls coming through, thousands, hundreds of thousands of phone calls wanting to be made to find out, are our loved ones safe? So this business of casualty tracking and victim identification is another key voice that tourism needs in the industry. And airlines make sure that they have call centers, so do hotels, so do cruise companies, and so do emergency management agencies and the police. But because there are these multiple regions, multiple ways in which people can call, how do we integrate that? How do we integrate that so that tourism has a legitimate and reliable means of casualty tracking its clients? Because governments create these casualty tracking systems for their own people, and mixed amongst their own people are the very tourists we're seeking to identify. So multiple calls and multiple duplications because of different systems being run by different people. It's vital that for reputational purposes, we get tourism's voice into casualty tracking. Similarly, in response, we've got to get tourism's voice absolutely clear in the national strategic communication that comes out from a country when it's afflicted by a disaster. Now, we already know that the typical government information service media strategies are often slow to be able to respond to the sorts of crises that are happening because of all the governmental ministerial checks that need to go. Meantime, social media has completely dominated the story. We've got to improve tourism's voice there. And we've got to make sure that national travel advisories, government foreign offices are saying it's now safe to go when it's safe to go. Sometimes the travel advisories are much slower at releasing their tourists than the host nation saying it is now safe to come. I can't praise enough Patter's document on strategic crisis communication. I think it is one of the best documents to have been produced in this subject. And then on this last little issue on response, we have the issue of multi-agency exercises. We've got to practice as an industry more and more to ensure that our senior leadership teams within the tourism industry can quickly become crisis management teams. And that's why I fully support what Bert was saying earlier. Finally, in my last 30 seconds before you'll hear a duck make a funny noise, in the area of recovery, I find it fascinating that nations, when they talk about national recovery for disasters, they don't talk about ministries, they talk about critical national infrastructure. We must get that sorted out. That is cross-ministry. There you go, there goes the duck. And they talk about environmental impacts. They talk about clearing the rubble of landslides and road blockages and bridges and harbor channels. This is all multiple cross-ministry activity. Similarly, the human and social impacts. They talk about the duty of care so that we have tracked our victims. We've issued death certificates. We've made sure wills and legacies are being sorted out. Schools and shelters and warehousing. All of this because we don't want people to be displaced. We don't want people to leave the country. All of this is multi-ministry and also economic and business, ensuring that the international reputation of the country is maintained and the importance of public and private partnerships. When we're in recovery, we don't think as ministries, we think as domains. And this is where I believe tourism can find its voice. Duck notwithstanding, that's me finished.
Thank you so much. This was fascinating. And I think this time, David, we're going now from London to Washington, D.C.
We are indeed. Just before we go to Washington, I just wanted to thank Richard, because Richard's organization, the Center for Disaster Management, is arguably one of the leading centers in the world. And I think from what you've just heard from Richard, you can now really see why. So thank you very much. We now go from Europe to the Western Hemisphere. And Charles, I will be very happy for you to introduce yourself. But the interesting thing, of course, the United States is 50 states. And Charles, of course, has a responsibility for one of those states, actually the District of Columbia, to be precise, rather than a state. But it's really fantastic to have you here, Charles. And I shall shut up and let you get on with it. Thank you.
All right, David, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Sure can.
Yes.
All right. Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone from Washington, D.C. As David said, my name is Charlie Gademi. I work for the District of Columbia's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, where I serve as the statewide interoperability coordinator. In the United States, each state or territory is supposed to have a statewide interoperability coordinator. I oversee all major projects involving voice, data, and video in the nation's capital to help ensure real-time situational awareness. I'd like to talk a little bit about what communications interoperability is. It refers to the ability of emergency responders to communicate on demand in real time when needed and as authorized, resulting in an effective shared understanding and situational awareness among responders and the command structure. So 2 things I want to leave with you before my presentation is over is, number 1, communications is a lifeline. Number 2, you can't worry about communications related issues, either voice, data, video, when you need them and you no longer have them available. At that point, it's too late and you're going to end up in an after action report. My primary responsibility as the DC Statewide Interoperability Coordinator is to ensure a healthy and robust emergency communications ecosystem. The ecosystem that you see on the slide has 4 key components that I support. The first one is the public to government piece. This allows the citizen, the tourist, the business owner, the ability to call for help, report something, or interact with the government. In the United States, it's known as our 911 system. Other parts of the world have different codes for it. It's your emergency communication centers where they could call for that help. We are currently migrating to next generation 911, which is getting beyond voice calls, that we're also able to send text messages to our 911 center. Even now we're accepting video to our 911 centers. The next piece is the government to government piece. We get information from the public, and now we could coordinate what our response is going to be among the government entities. And that could come over the form of a dispatch to radio for the first responders. It could come from the computer-aided dispatch to their mobile data terminals in their vehicles. If we need mutual aid from other surrounding jurisdictions, it could come from computer-aided dispatch from one emergency communication center to another emergency communication. That's how the information is shared. Once the government has this information, sometimes we need to notify the public. In this case, when it comes to wildland fires or natural disasters, what information do we want to give the public? Stay away from this area, safe haven or shelter in place, evacuate to this location. That comes in the form of notifications, alert, and warnings. We have a lot of local apps that we utilize, and those are usually subscriber-based when we run special events. We advertised what these apps are so we could contact the individuals. But we also had the wireless emergency alert, where by pinging everybody's cell phone in a geographic location that we could target, geo-target locate, we could send a specific message that we wanted the public to get to. The last part of the ecosystem is perhaps the most important, and that's the public-to-public piece. Everyone is usually involved in this in some form or another. It has to do with social media, emailing, texting. It gives the government a way of monitoring the heartbeat of the community and an opportunity to gather information, either through their public information people or some of their intel and infusion centers. And this form of communication comes in the way of social media, Facebook, Meta, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Google, TripAdvisor, OpenTable. These are all the ways that communications happen. In this key function, this is where the tourism industry and business will thrive, from information sharing, advertisements, special deals. This is how the competition sees how they're doing against others, how the reviews are being written, whether it's through Yelp or some other online services. This is also, unfortunately, the fastest way to spread misinformation and disinformation. And after a disaster, what we see most often are the scammers come out and they prey on the people that need help the most, or those that are willing to give to support the cause. Another part of what I do is also to create connectivity, coverage, and capacity, not only in open spaces, but also in building coverage and then subterranean. And subterranean mean by parking garages or metro or subways. Also maritime and aviation. All of this has to be coordinated so we could have a robust emergency communication system. A key factor in ensuring this operational success is to ensure that the ecosystem remains healthy, robust, and more importantly, available. We work very closely with our federal, state, and local government agencies, as well as the private sector. The most important private sector for this ecosystem is the cellular industry. As a society today, we have an over-reliance on our cell phone. Many of us don't even know our own phone number, but that's the way we bank. That's the way we get a share ride. That's the way we unlock the door to our front door. For tourism, this is critical from a point of sales perspective. Credit card transactions, reservations, spa bookings, concierge services all rely on this form of communications. For tourism and businesses, in an emergency or after a catastrophic event, the ability to call for help, report information, or reunite families will become essential. You heard the previous speaker, Richard, talk about call centers. If we don't have that infrastructure, those call centers don't exist. Today's threat centers are not only around man-made events, but also from those from fire and extreme weather, as hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and flooding. Fires and extreme weather can take away your critical infrastructure, the same critical infrastructure that supports your communications lifeline. Usually during these extreme weather fire occurrences, you lose electricity. Power is the first thing to go. What happens when you lose your battery backups? You lose your solar panels, you lose your generator. Communication services have proven to be significant for emergency and disaster response and recovery. And lastly, I'd just like to say we teach PACE planning. PACE planning is a military concept to ensure that you have a primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency capability. Your primary is your everyday method, your alternate is your backup method, your contingency is your fallback method, and your emergency or your last resort methods. In a catastrophic event, usually you're facing the E, and that is the one thing that we practice the least. So it all comes back to training and putting our people in an environment that when an emergency happens, they'll know how to respond. So we often take the P and the A away in some of the exercises we do, and we start with the C and see how people react to working with the contingency and emergency type event. The last major event we had here in the district was a man-made event. You may remember January 6th of 2021 was the insurrection at the United States Capitol. That tested our communication system, that tested our resolve, that tested our response capability. So with that being said, I'd like to conclude, David, my presentation. I'm certainly available for any questions by email, and I'll turn it back to you, sir. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And this was a really good presentation. David, if I can suggest a change, we have Professor Lloyd from Jamaica. He's in a crisis in trying to sort out a flight situation. Can we have him on now, and then we switch
Professor Lloyd Waller, you mean?
Yes.
Oh yeah. I don't. Are you happy with that, Peter? And also Peter too, and with Bill.
Yeah, I thought there may be.
Hold on, just one price, just one bit. Because of the back, I'm having some issues with the background noise and the audio, because I'm still here trying to resolve this issue. Can you give me 20 minutes? Let me try to see if we can
your regular spot. You're on your regular spot then. So we just
okay. Sure. All right. Good. Okay.
Okay, so David, maybe you introduce our next guest.
For sure, but also too, I just wanted to thank Charles for a terrific presentation. In fact, it was a good link between the presentation made by Richard from the UK to the practical work that you're actually doing in Washington DC. So it was great, and so thank you very much. Our next speaker is Lieutenant Colonel Bill Furs. And what's interesting about Bill is that Bill is going to be talking about a very important aspect of dealing with crises, and also to the challenge of the military working with the tourism industry. So Bill, it's great to have you here, and it's really great to get your specialist military insight, because quite often we think of tourism as, Hawaiian shirts and good times, but also too, at the background, really, the military play a critical role in all areas of emergency management. So thank you very, very much. And over to you, sir.
Thank you, David. Are you able to hear me okay? And you can see the screen?
Yes,
great. Yes.
Great.
Oh, sorry. Oh, hang on. That was me.
No, we're fine. Go ahead.
No, you muted him.
No. I didn't.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
All right. Somebody was muting me, and I just clicked it. Okay. No problem. Let me introduce myself again. As David said, I'm a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. I spent 27 years in the military at various levels, and I'll kind of go through what the military's capability is. You can see the young picture of myself there on the screen, which is a bit dated, but I thought I'd share that with you all. I would like to just quickly also introduce that the basics of what I do now. I'm the Director of Security and Safety Services with an architectural and engineering firm. And a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, disaster recovery and preparedness, is a lot of stuff that I do in my practices. I have a cybersecurity practice, a physical security practice, an emergency management practice, and a transit safety and security practice. But today I'm here to ask and talk to a little bit about what the military does in a natural disaster and recovery aspect of it. My first exposure to actually being in the military was in the National Guard. And the National Guard's primary mission is to effectively support the state in which they operate. The state does provide them the ability to call on them in an emergency and depend on them to help with disaster response, helping with the public evacuation, helping with recovery operations. And what happened in Maui is no different. The National Guard, both the Air National Guard and Army National Guard, was called to support in the recovery operations there. The primary focus, though, that the military does provide is the ability to provide available resources, both manpower and logistical support, to help with emergency needs of the community and the public, as well as operational services to help reestablish civil order and social arrangements within the local jurisdictions and law enforcement in order to effectively reestablish itself. The primary thing that you have a tendency to see that the military will do is provide portable sanitation, help with the evacuations, and effectively support the recovery of schools and hospitals. I'm going to try share a quick video. It won't last long, but what the National Guard does. So let's see if it works.
The National Guard mission, in my opinion, is unique because the soldiers not only serve their country, but they serve their immediate community. So that's from combat missions overseas to domestic incidents within the states. Military assets are called upon by civilian authorities to assist in domestic response. And some of the incidents could be man-made disasters, a public health pandemic, or natural disasters.
Feels like we're actually doing the job that we're signed up for, really. Our mission is to provide support for the personnel and the volunteers and the local law enforcement, to making sure everybody's where they need to be. And we also patrol areas they're not supposed to be in, make sure they're not there.
With that background in the military, most soldiers, when we run towards the fire, we go to the fight. People come first, right?
Hopefully you were able to hear that. I wasn't sure if good.
Yeah. It was terrific.
Good. All right. I'm going to change a little bit. So we talked about the National Guard and the intent of what the National Guard does here in the United States. But there's another key element within the active duty arena that is critical towards supporting our disaster recovery efforts here in the United States. That's the United States Army Corps of Engineers. It's comprised of engineering teams, active duty military that predominantly support, at least from a disaster recovery standpoint, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, who directs all federal recovery efforts here in the United States. And the Army Corps of Engineers is their primary tool in order to effectively execute various types of specialized recovery and engineering services support. The Corps of Engineers can be mobilized either on their own authority as directed by local district commanders under a National Emergency Preparedness Program Act or as at the request of FEMA. The Public Works, which is the Army Corps of Engineers, is broken into two parts, has one part that specifically supports the military and the Department of Defense operations, and then the other part, which is a Civil Works program. And the Civil Works program predominantly focuses on civil structures here domestically in the United States, navigable waterways, flood control, emergency management support in support of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Another unique element that the Corps of Engineers does is also, real quickly, I'll go to the next slide, focus on temporary emergency power, which I'll show you here in a minute. When a disaster strikes, one of the first things we all have a tendency to experience is a loss of power. And so from that perspective, they have a specialized unit that focuses on supporting power and emergency power recovery efforts. The Corps of Engineers supports debris removal and management. For those that unfortunately had the experience of seeing and witnessing 9/11, the debris removal of the Trey Towers, the two Twin Towers, was led by the Army Corps of Engineers to pull that debris and remove it from the city of New York. Temporary housing and critical public facilities, temporary roofing, infrastructure assessments, technical assistance in water wastewater response, and the report and support for urban search and rescue operations. So I have one more video to show you, and this has to do with what the 249th Engineering Battalion does for the Corps of Engineers.
Through assessments for PRASA, we're working on their lift stations, their pump houses, basically their water treatment facilities, to ensure in the future if another event happens like Hurricane Maria and they lose power, they can quickly have access to backup emergency generation. The facility we're standing on right now is a freshwater dam that they use to pump raw water to their treatment plants to supply drinking water to the population here. When we assess these facilities, we're looking for the large users of electricity, large motors, large pumps, the larger systems in the facilities to ensure that we put a generator capable of carrying the facility. This is between a 6 and 8 megawatt facility. So the challenges there are going to be bringing in a power plant large enough to supply 8 megawatts of power with the small twisty roads that lead to this facility. All the points of contact provided by PRASA have been very knowledgeable and very helpful and have really helped to expedite the process of this mission.
So that's my presentation, a quick introduction to the military's ability to respond and help domestically, and also in cases of international aspects of disaster recovery. The Corps of Engineers has been deployed to support operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, power production or power replacement in Europe, as well as in Puerto Rico and also in Central America.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks for your service and your excellent presentation. And with this, I'm giving the floor to our president for World Tourism Network, what is Dr. Peter Talo. He doesn't really need a big introduction, I think. But Peter, you can probably do this yourself the best. And thank you. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, before we begin, I want to thank David Beirman for all the tremendous work he's done on this. And of course, Jürgen Steinmetz for everything he's done. I also want to thank two of my colleagues and friends, Charlie Gademi, who's in Washington with me right now, and also Bill Foos, with whom I've worked for years. Today's presentation is going to be very succinct. I want to build on what Bert had spoken about. And so David has been nice enough. He's going to do the share the screen, as I'm traveling right now and I'm just on an iPad. But I want to speak about a number of things. The first of those is that when we look at tourism, the risk is always the disaster. The crisis management shows a lack of risk. And when we do a lack of risk, that means we have to begin to think about certain concepts. One, the further we are away from an event, the worse it seems, and the longer it will take place. Secondly, though years ago we used to talk about natural disasters, then we kind of moved it to climate change. But in either case, what it's really saying is we as a tourism group or as a society fail to take things into account. For example, the worst disaster in the United States was in 1903 in Galveston, Texas, where over 100,000 people died. The same way, for example, we know one way or the other that there will be a disaster in Florida on the Keys, where you have large apartment buildings on nothing more than sand dunes with a minimal number of bridges for evacuation. So having said that, I'd like to talk about three particular areas. One, looking at how tourists react. Two, what are some of the processes we can use for risk management? And three, what are some of the basic goals of risk management when it comes to tourism? So David, if you can put up that slide, if it will go up, I'd be thrilled. But if not, I'll just do it without the slide. You are muted, David, so I can't hear you. I don't know what you're saying, so I'll just go without the slide. Tourists, when we travel, have certain key elements. The first one is that when we travel, we assume where we're going is safe. Therefore, what we do is we tend to ignore the warnings and the realities, and it doesn't enter into the mind. For example, David, if you move to the next one, it'd be great. So we tend to leave our common sense at home. For example, if you think about the terrible tsunami in Thailand, people were running into the ocean instead of away from it. Secondly, when we travel, we tend to be anomic. In other words, we don't understand what the regulations are, especially if we're in a foreign country. Thirdly, we tend not to worry about our inhibitions. Very often we will drink too much or stay out too late. We're on vacation. And remember, the word vacation comes from the French word vacances, which means to empty your mind. Basically, a visitor is paying you to worry about him. So you cannot expect the visitor to think through what needs to be done. Visitors tend to become upset very easily. If you have 10 things in tourism and you do 9 of them correctly and one poorly, it will be the one issue that's poorly done that we'll look at. In the same way, because visitors may not understand the language, may not understand the culture, they can panic very easily. And panics can lead to disasters. One of the tragedies of Hawaii was there were no way of helping people not to panic. So people were running to airports, even though in the other islands, there were no fires. And last but not least, Time is the #1 factor when visitors make decision-making. So they become upset very quickly, and people become furious if they cannot get on a plane, or the plane is delayed, or whatever it happens to be. So when we plan for disasters, we have to think of those things in retrospect. Now, risk. When we travel, we risk. There is no place on earth, there's no travel, there's no trip that doesn't have risk. Risk is a constant in both place and time. We are always in a state of risk. Possibly when we're dead, there's no risk, but as long as you're alive, there will always be a risk. We can never totally eliminate all risks. Therefore, we're going to have to think about how do we work with those risks, mitigate them to make them the least possible. Few travelers ever think about the risk. Most travelers believe when they go to some place, it will be perfect and there will be no problems. Therefore, it's our job to think about the risk before they get there. Now, a good risk management can save a tourism industry money, time, and reputation. In the heart, you can regain some of the money. It takes a long time to regain a reputation, but you can never regain the time that's lost. And so we have to think about those 3 concepts and how we're measuring our risk. Risk management means that we have to develop good stochastic modeling. In other words, probability studies. What is the probability that X will happen in Y? In Hawaii, it was highly probable that there would be terrible fires. The city was surrounded by very flammable gas. They had never really practiced getting water into the fire hydrants, and the electric company and the fire hydrant and the fire department had not coordinated. We should not be shocked that the tragedy took place. And if we now move to the next slide, we have to think about types of risk. And the risk is misspelled, I apologize. Type 1 is unlikely, is a risk that is unlikely to occur, and the consequences are minimal. And we can say, for example, it's very unlikely that there'll be a snowstorm in Maui. And if it happens, people just throw snowballs. It's not the end of the world. Type 2 type risks indicate that the risk is likely to occur. So it will happen very often. But again, the consequences are minimal, such as you'll have a rainstorm. The worst that'll happen is you get wet. Now, I'm not talking about a devastating rainstorm, just a thunderstorm that won't do too much damage. Type 3, it's unlikely to occur, but the consequences are devastating. And that is certainly one of the problems that we have to face. It is unlikely we will have an earthquake in many places, such as, for example, in Morocco. But when it happened, the consequences were devastating. In type 4, it's likely to occur and the consequences are devastating. Now, those last 2, 3, and 4 is where we need to put our priorities. So we need to think through when we're looking at a risk. What is the risk to human beings? What is the risk to ecology? What is the risk to reputation? What is the risk to our economy? In order for tourism to survive, we have to have good risk management. And I want to again emphasize what Bert said. A crisis occurs when we haven't done our good risk management. If we are prepared, then we can mitigate that risk. We're able to work with the media. We're able to work with our visitors. We're able to have people praise us instead of claiming that we made a mistake. So again, I want to thank David for all his work. I want to thank my colleagues from here in the United States who presented so beautifully. And of course, I want to thank Jürgen Steinmetz for all the work he's put in creating this broadcast. Please see us in Bali. It'll be a great place to learn about risk. And this will be the World Tourism Network's very first international in-person conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And we have one change. Professor Waller is dealing with a crisis at the airport. Apparently, he told me he's in the director's office at American Airlines. I don't know. I think he's trying to get to
Jürgen, would you call that a type 3 risk or type 4 risk? Likely to occur and the consequences. So I think any of us who fly a lot know that today when you travel, you're in a type 4 risk. It probably will occur and the consequences will be devastating.
Yeah, so airlines are hard to talk to these days. I know this firsthand. An hour and a half wait, if you're one of their platinum whatever member, doesn't make any difference anymore. So I feel sorry for him, but he said he may have to skip this session and he's apologizing. So what I'm thinking we would do is maybe go to Dr. Ansi Gamage, if it's okay, a little bit early. And if anyone is not ready, then what we could do is open for questions and answers in between.
Yes.
So we can move forward. So if it's okay, David, maybe you can introduce our...
Yeah, with pleasure. Ansi, firstly, it's terrific you're here. Hopefully you're available to talk. I notice you've already checked in. Hello.
I'm free. Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Ansi. So Ansi's actually at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, which is one of Melbourne's finest universities. Also, too, she's done a lot of work in the area of human resource management in relation to bushfires, which, of course, is very relevant to Maui, and it's looks like it's going to be pretty relevant to us in Australia. Victoria, unfortunately, has the reputation in Australia of being the bushfire capital of the country. And Ansi's been doing some terrific work with actually a team of fellow researchers, a lot of them from Victoria University, in the whole area of tourism working in with bushfires. In fact, Victoria was the first state in Australia to actually have a bushfire strategy involving tourism, emergency management and government. So Ansi, with that slightly long introduction, it's over to you, and thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, David, for that very kind introduction. Let me just share my screen. Perfect. Well, I'll have to say, first of all, that I'm from RMIT. I'm a senior lecturer in management, but I just joined 3 months ago. So a lot of the work that I've been doing has actually come through from Victoria University. So I was associated to the School for the Visitor Economy, and I'm still an adjunct research fellow at Victoria University. So I'm still doing a bit of work with my wonderful teammates there. So I'll be talking about HRM, but also talking about resilience and vulnerability, and introducing to you a framework that we've been using in a lot of the projects that we've done over the years. But before I do a deep dive into the research we've done, I'll just give you a bit of a context, brief overview of the context around bushfire management in Victoria. So when we talk about, as you know, David has mentioned, Victoria has a very long history of bushfires. And when we talk about bushfire management, first of all, we've got to acknowledge the amazing work done by, the emergency services in Victoria. But we also have to acknowledge the fact that a lot of the time, these responses and their focus have been top down. So really looking at, saving lives, properties, and biodiversity, which is rightly so a very important perspective. So with that in mind, a couple of years ago, there's been that kind of conversation about, well, how do we bring the tourism economy into that discussion? Because there's been some form of neglect in terms of, how emergency management strategies impact tourism destinations. And I'll give you a very simple example. So when, there's emergency management kicking in, there's going to be road closures. So those strategies that are put in place, for closing roads when it's necessary for safety reasons, sometimes the choice of the closure points might mean that some tourism destinations that are not directly impacted, or that, you know, might be unnecessarily closed off for prolonged periods of time, and then that impacts visitation. So with that kind of example, there's been a bit of a push, or there's been a very keen interest to understand what a bottom-up approach might look like, how to bring tourism into that conversation. I think that's what a lot of the speakers have been talking about. Now, Visit Victoria has done a lot of work in that space, and there's been work done by Stuart Toplitz and other parties. But Victoria University, the team that I've been working with, have also done a bit of work in that particular space. So in 2015, the team applied a vulnerability and resilience framework to understand the different characteristics of, you know, tourism destinations that might enhance resilience or undermine or, you know, enhance vulnerability of the tourism system. So in 2015, that work was done in Harriettville, which is very lovely regional tourism destination. And the framework that they, you know, that was used drew from the couple human environment systems approach. So basically identifying the different types of systems and factors that are at play, and they're interconnected when we look at destination resilience and vulnerability. Now, because of time constraints, I'm not going to have a lot of time to go over that particular framework, but that framework has been updated a couple of times based on the different projects that we've been doing, and this is the latest version of the framework. Now, just wanted to kind of pinpoint to the key components of the framework in terms of the different factors out there. So the economic factors, and I think we've heard that with the presentations before. Economic factors, for example, the level of dependence on tourism as an economic reliance on tourism. So if a destination has very high reliance, on tourism as a source of income, then obviously when there's a shock or stressor, that all economic activities will cease, and therefore the destination itself becomes vulnerable. We've heard about human and social factors, mental health and well-being being a really important part of that. Physical and environmental factors, the natural settings, if a tourism destination is located in bushland location, which is really, really beautiful, but this makes it highly vulnerable as well to bushfires. And infrastructure as well is another part of that. Governance processes, from what Richard was talking about before, the political support for tourism, understanding of the value of tourism in certain destinations, which is a very significant factor that contributes to destination resilience. And obviously tourism businesses themselves are really important, part of that story around destination resilience. The level of adaptability, risk management planning, and innovation that businesses bring, on the table is really important to enhance resilience. So I'm not going to talk too much about all the different examples around those factors, but really the key point is understanding that this particular framework have been used in some of the projects. And I'll introduce you to one of the projects that we've done in 2020 in relation to the Black Summer bushfires. Now, for those who are aware of it, 2019, 2020, massive fires in Victoria that spread through New South Wales. In that space of time, the research team decided to look at, resilience and vulnerability of different tourism destinations. So we had a mixed methodology. So we did a survey, but we also collected, qualitative data from different destinations. Now, I'm only going to present the findings in relation to Bright, because as you can see from that picture here, Bright was directly impacted by the bushfires. So the gray area is where the fire locations were. So we had we did 17 interviews with a broad range of stakeholders, so SMEs, so business owners, government agencies, industry bodies, and community organizations. So this project was done in collaboration with the Victoria Tourism Industry Council. So we did get access to quite, high-level stakeholders to be able to contribute and give us a really broad idea of some of the challenges around managing, the bushfire. Now, in terms of the the key findings. Well, just wanted to also show you that little picture on the left around Bright. If anybody hasn't been there before, very lovely town, which is located in Victoria's northeastern high country. A very popular tourism destination in Victoria, which, you know, markets itself around the pillars of, you know, cycling, snow, food and drink, culture, you know, nature-based experiences mostly as well. And tourism is the largest employer in the region. Approximately 20% of the working population, you know, is employed in the tourism sector. And that particular destination is reliant on domestic visitation. So 99% of visitors come, you know, predominantly from Victoria. So really high, highly sought after location for Victorians. Now, applying our framework, the one that I've showed you before, there were many different layers of complexity in terms of the findings. I'm just going to highlight a few of them because of time constraints. The first one is that we found that the fires had a really immediate impact on, you know, well-being, and that's not surprising. So very poor health outcomes for employees, business owners, and individuals in the community. High levels of anxiety and stress, and it was because of, you know, obviously the proximity of the fires, but there were also multiple evacuations over different periods of time. And the fact that there was very negative media coverage, very sensationalized media coverage of the fires as well, contributed to that. And what was interesting is that the community in Bright were very proud of their own personal resilience, and therefore they were reluctant to ask for help. So they didn't really seek any form of mental health support, even if that kind of support was available to them at the time. We also found, from a HR perspective, challenges in terms of talent management. So talent shortages, difficulty in getting people back into the workplace, talent retention challenges. And I think this is a theme that's been very common since with the pandemic as well. So Bright is really reliant on backpackers, and the lack of housing, unaffordable housing, has meant that it's very difficult to bring workers back to the region, and therefore that had an impact on the operations of businesses. A lot of businesses were talking about how they had to operate and reduce hours. Other factors that contributed to business vulnerability were insurance costs. So we found that the cost of insurance had increased between 100 to 400% in those bushfire affected regions. There was also lack of formal risk management planning by SMEs. So in the tourism industry, 95% of those businesses are, small micro businesses, part of the SME, definition. And therefore those businesses didn't have a formal risk management strategy, very informal way of looking at risk and managing the business, because obviously that wasn't really part of their of the priority. So what we also found was, there were a lot of challenges in managing the fires and obviously managing this HR aspects, but there was also positive signs of resilience, both at the individual level and at the business level. So employees, for example, talked about, really strong sense of community among themselves, especially in those businesses with really good, positive cultures. So business owners who had employee-oriented practices, had established a really good culture, were, really focused on values of ethics, compassion, even before the fires. This meant that, there was a very strong, collaborative relationship, and therefore that has helped employees during the fires. We also found that businesses who were they were able to recover faster if they had very strong collaboration between themselves. So strong industry connections, industry accreditation was another part of that. Strong collaborative relationships and very, very strong communication systems among themselves. So what that meant for us, therefore, and I think a lot of those findings, were confirmed by other projects as well. But what that meant for us, it meant that for us from a policy perspective, we realize the importance of, training and investing in industry development, understanding the unique, needs of those business owners, especially in regional destinations, and trying to make those destinations more resilient to future shocks. Obviously, the bushfire was a big shock, but the pandemic made it a dual crisis situation. And I think with, the climate change and the probability of other shocks, it's really important to start really thinking about how do we ensure that business owners are able to be more attuned to those future challenges. Destination planning was also a really key part of our recommendation, making sure that different destinations were collaborating with each other and were communicating with each other with part of that. Just to finish off, I wanted to introduce the team because this wasn't a solo exercise. We had wonderful people from, the School for the Visitor Economy at Victoria University. So we had Joanne Pike, who couldn't be here today, Professor Terry DeLacy, and Van Nguyen as well, who was part of the team. So some of those findings are also have been reported in the handbook on crisis and disaster management in tourism that's been edited by Bruce and David, and it's going to be formally launched next year at CALFI. Well, thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, very happy to take them.
Thank you very much. And yes, we will try to give a few minutes for questions at the end of this event, but maybe we can move forward with Professor Jeff Wilkes. David, if you want to introduce him.
Yes, indeed. I'd be happy to introduce Jeff. Jeff is sort of one of the leading lights of tourism risk and crisis management. In fact, set up actually at the University of Queensland some years ago. I think, what was it called? That was the Centre of Risk and Crisis Management at University of Queensland, and it's certainly been one of the pioneers, the academic pioneers in the field. Jeff is sort of every Jewish mother's dream. He's both a legal expert, he's a lawyer, he's a doctor. I don't think you're an accountant though, Jeff, are you? So, but anyway, Jeff has certainly had a tremendous history of publications, particularly in the area of tourism risk, crisis and recovery. I've had the privilege of being involved in a couple of them, Tourism in Turbulent Times, and of course the latest book which has come out, which has dealt very much with COVID. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to allow Jeff to talk about basically being prepared for crises. And I think this will follow on from some of the other speakers who have come before. So thank you very, very much. I've had a look at your presentation. It's fantastic. So really worth looking at. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Sharing the screen. Here we go. Fantastic. How does that look?
Wonderful.
Beautiful. Great. Okay. All right. So, yes, good morning to everyone. Thank you, Jürgen, and thank you, David and Peter, but particularly David, for keeping us all really together on this project. And to the people of Maui, my thoughts and wishes go out to you in this difficult time. I'm sure that this forum is going to provide some help for us all to address the global trend in devastating fires. And for my lead slide there, this is just some new material on Australia and our situation. So we're with Maui in the sense that that's our fire risk coming into this season. Great sections of Australia are at high intensity risk for bushfires in this coming season. So, and this is the Australian-New Zealand National Council for Fire and Emergency Services produces these sort of maps. And I particularly wanted to start with that because in terms of preparing for crises, what some of the work that Bert was referring to earlier, we're all, particularly now, where's my second slide? Very focused on preparedness. making arrangements, creating and testing plans, training, educating. So I'm not a crisis person. I'm a prevention person, and it's been interesting during my career that the swiftness and the cleverness of people dealing with crisis in the moment is not my style. I'm slow. I grew up in Papua New Guinea. I've had malaria. I go through life very carefully, and it fits that preparedness framework. Interestingly enough, the United Nations World Tourism Organization has been talking about the preparedness and prevention part of this equation for many years, back in 1997 with their recommended measures for tourism. But it's only COVID-19 and global warming appreciation that's changed many things. Richard was saying a little earlier from the UK that tourism needs a voice. And what I've always said is that we need a seat at the big table. We need to be part of the preparedness for all sorts of disasters, but to be included. Interestingly enough, with COVID, last year, the World Health Organization is now recommending that tourism should be prioritized as an active member in the development of national health and emergency planning and management structures. So they're recognizing, at least from a health point of view, that the tourism should have a spot at the big table and be included in all sorts of planning exercises for national health emergencies. The WHO also changes this little model of preparedness, response, and recovery. They're looking at it a little bit differently now after COVID and talking about anticipation, adaptation, absorption, and transformation. And it's the anticipation, I think, that's really important now when we're talking about bushfires, the situation in Maui, and the global threat, particularly of fires. Getting on the front foot, getting ahead of the game, thinking through things before they happen. So for my contribution today, I wanted to just talk on three areas. Firstly, technology, and I'm going to keep it very firmly on bushfires. Technology and early warning systems. How do we get ahead of the game, given all of the technology that's now available because of COVID-19, or I guess fast-tracked because of COVID-19? What about our response capability? And as David Beirman said to me yesterday when we were talking on the phone, all very well if you know what's going to happen, but you've got to have firefighters on the ground. You've got to have someone there to put the fire out. So let's talk about response capability, and then if we've got time, a case study. So I hope that's the little shot there. It talks about lightning starting a fire and all the types of technology that we have now available. Drones, on the ground, sensors, cameras in towers. And I'll just share with you, I said to David, I got a bit distracted in this preparation, looking at all the fantastic things that fire protection agencies now have in place. There's transitions, particularly in Australia, transitions to AI-powered bushfire detection and monitoring using satellite technology, ultra-high definition 360-degree panoramic cameras, and using AI to improve overall the early detection of fires. So the interesting thing here is this technology can actually see through smoke. We've got geothermal mapping now that allows you to sense when the earth is getting too hot and you're likely to ignite a fire. Very interestingly, one of the things that comes out of fire responses is over time that the teams out in the field often lose communications, black spots, remote situations. Now they're rolling out mobile Wi-Fi equipment recently installed in over 1,300 fire and rescue in New South Wales and New South Wales State Emergency Service vehicles, which ensures 3G or satellite communication access during incident responses. So you're putting the Wi-Fi capability in the vehicles. And as a node, this allows crews to connect directly to satellites. So you're starting to have this wide detection. Let's anticipate where the fire is going to be a problem. When we get people addressing the fire, let them communicate effectively. Let's not go into a black spot. Australia is also blessed in that we've got a number of agencies, and I've just put four there: the Emergency Management Agency, the Institute of Disaster Resilience. We've got incredible resources and knowledge, evidence-based knowledge being collected by government agencies. And I say this because in an international forum like that, a lot of that is public domain sharing. And so if you're in a destination that doesn't have the resources to have gold-plated fire prevention resources, you can share. This sort of material is open to share, and the agencies are open to share. But as I was saying with David before, yesterday, all very well if you can spot the fire and anticipate it, but you need the trained and equipped firefighters. What I'm seeing, and it was in the Courier Mail national newspaper, Queensland newspaper yesterday, that there's some concerns that we have got behind in backburning, in preparing for a hot summer. And yesterday, the Bureau of Meteorology announced that we've entered an El Nino period. The official announcement yesterday: stand by Australia, you're going to have a very hot period coming forwards. Hot summer, lots of risk of bushfires. So the actions that are part of management plans, the burning and prevention need to be completed. We also need funding and volunteers. Another thing that's happening in Australia is that we rely on volunteers for the rural fire brigades. And with COVID, that volunteer army is shrinking. People are having, with the cost of living, to have a second job. They just don't have the spare time to volunteer. And unless funding is available, the army of volunteers, the actual firefighters in the field, are going to be depleted. For tourist operators, of course, you need fire management plans and staff training, including, as a couple of speakers have said, those practices, the drills. Can I just say, I've put in there the Association of British Travel Agents, ABTA, their workbook on risk management, for want of a better term, is probably the best resource I have ever found in terms of walking tourism operators through their responsibilities for fire, water, a whole range of safety things. The interesting thing there is that unlike other destinations, ABTA has works within a legal framework. So there is actually an incentive for tourism operators to have fire management plans and fire training, staff training, because there are legal responsibilities that go with that. But I thought I'd mention that resource because it's probably the best in the world, as far as I'm concerned, for a tourism operator getting prepared in this area. So finally, and I'm conscious of the time, I spoke to Steve Noakes yesterday. He's currently in Indonesia. Many of you will know Steve. He's been a long-term icon in sustainable tourism. He's also chairman of the Binabara Lodge, which is not very far from where I am at the moment. So it's situated in freehold land out inside the Lamington National Park, part of the UNESCO World Heritage listed Gondwana rainforests of Australia. The area contains the world's most extensive subtropical rainforest and nearly all of the world's Arctic beach cool temperate rainforest. So it's an amazing place. And you see from the one photo I've got there, which was of 2018, it's a fantastic lodge established in 1933, nestled in bushland. Unfortunately, on the 8th of September 2019, a bushfire destroyed most of the heritage buildings in the lodge, completely wiped it out. Griffith University has had collaboration with the lodge, working through the crisis and recovery and documenting all the work that an operator can do to recover from such a traumatic fire. But I wanted to talk to Steve on the phone yesterday to get some insights from him. And there's just a couple to share with you. So because they are in a World Heritage listed area and they had responsibilities, they had a fantastic management plan in place. They had risk reduction, including bushfire management consultants on all their buildings. They'd had a controlled burn the month prior to the fire. Staff trained very highly in bushfire response. They developed relationships with emergency services. They had it all in place, and yet the wildfire jumped boundaries and took out the lodge. I asked Steve, a couple of insights for, what you would do in preparation for a similar thing happening again. And they do all the same things, but one or two that really surprised me. Firstly, they'd have more backup generators in the short term and then move to solar panels. So power, and Bill Furs was talking about the importance of the Army in restoring power in crisis situations. So power is really important. Traditionally, this lodge was a no phone zone. So the idea was for people to go back to nature, relax, and get off your mobile phone. And they actually dissuaded people from having their mobile phones. Having had that experience with the fire, they've changed the philosophy a little bit to boost the Wi-Fi and internet so that people have capacity and communication is more available in a crisis situation. Two others, planting more fire-resistant or fire-tolerant plants around the resort. It's interesting, Nancy was just saying about insurance. You can't buy fire insurance at the moment. There's no insurance available for bushfires. So I guess what I'd say is that that's an area that we need to be working on, where if you can demonstrate, as in other parts of insurance, that you've done all the right things to mitigate a crisis, you're really prepared and ready, then there should be a way to demonstrate to the insurance companies that you're a good risk and you should be able to buy that protection. I think I run out of time. Thank you again, David, for this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
And I also too, I say thank you very much indeed, Jeff, for sharing your insights and expertise. It's been a really interesting presentation. Now, if Jürgen, if you don't mind, I might introduce our next speaker, Bruce Prideaux. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Okay. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Bruce. Bruce and I have actually collaborated on a book which is coming soon, depending on how quickly the publishers work. So we've done and in fact, quite a number of the speakers today here actually have contributed to that book. Ansi has been one of them. Bert has been one of them. Richard Gordon's been one of them. So there's a gang of us. There's Masato Takamatsu, who's actually coming next. But the thing that Bruce is going to talk about today, which I think is very important, and I know Bert made mention of it in his speech, is the issue of climate change and its impact on the huge number of natural disasters we've had. So whether we talk about the fires in Maui or we talk about the fires in Canada, Western United States, Southern Europe, the floods that have just been happening, a lot of that actually has to do with climate change. And it is so, without any further ado, I'm going to let Bruce talk about this. Bruce has been probably one of the icons in terms of tourism risk, crisis and recovery over many years. He's published just about everywhere. And it's been a privilege for me also too, Bruce, I'll say this publicly, to have worked with you on this book with all of our other contributors over the last 2 years. So I shall shut up and it's over to you, sir.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning in Australia. I guess it's late afternoon, evening elsewhere. So I guess I should just say good day. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this. It was interesting. I was given this topic to talk about, which is climate change, which is very contested, actually. So I thought, what do I do? I've got 8 or 9 minutes to talk about climate change and the implications for risk. So what I think I've decided to do was, what is climate change, what it does, and how do we respond to it? So fairly simple. So if you bear with me. So climate change, I think we can talk about 2 types of climate change. One is natural climate change. It describes the long-term planetary forces that influence global climate patterns. And so these have been operating for hundreds of millions of years. It's interesting to look at what happens, though. In the last glacial maximum, about 20,000 years ago, sea levels were about 130 meters below what they are today. So in the last 20,000 years, in fact, in more so in, I guess, the last 10,000 years, sea levels have risen quite a lot. And we built all our cities 1 or 2 or 3 meters above sea level, a lot of coastal cities. In the mid-Pleistocene, warm period about 3 million years ago, atmospheric concentrations of CO2 exceeded 400 parts per million. Today, it's about 421. And that led to global climate temperatures that were up to 3 degrees higher than today and 20 meters above present day levels. So at that level, I'd be talking underwater, which I'm glad I'm not. The other type of climate change we've got is the one that we're really talking about a lot now, and it's much closer to us. It's happening very quickly, is anthropogenic climate change. It's driven by human actions, principally 2 interesting things, the use of fossil fuels, but also it's interesting to reflect that population growth in the last 100 years has gone from 2 billion to 8 billion. So we've quadrupled the number of people in the world, quadrupled the number of agricultural areas we need, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's one of the big drivers of what I'm seeing at the moment. So according to the IPCC, the impacts of anthropogenic climate change include things like more frequent drought, which we see in Australia a lot. We've seen the same thing happening in California and other areas, melting glaciers, ecosystem disruption, heavier rainfall, lots of examples of that this year, more intense windstorms, so cyclones, et cetera. And globally, we've seen a lot of large-scale wildfires. A lot of contesting in the science here, whether climate change has caused a lot of these things or whether it's an outcome of other forces. But these are things the IPCC has said will happen, and we're starting to see them happening. The interesting thing about global emissions for greenhouse gases is and when we talk about stabilization, it means that we stop basically the emissions that we've got and then hopefully wind them back. The biggest problem we've got in facing anthropogenic climate change is we don't know at what levels temperatures will rise to, because we don't know how quickly things like transition to net zero will occur. We don't know when that peak will be or when. So it's difficult to plan, but we know things are happening very quickly. So how do we plan in an era where we don't know when it's going to happen and at what level it's going to happen and what impact it's going to be? Similarly with sea level rise, we know it's happening. We've seen what's happened in the past. We know what could happen in the future. We don't know how high the seas will rise, how quickly it'll be, and when it'll cease. So these are really big issues. If we're looking at where I live in Cairns in Australia, the airport, a current sea level rise will start to face at high tide, about 2070, we'll start to find it at really high tides, we'll start to find part of the airport will go under water. Something will happen in lots of other destinations as well. So that makes planning really difficult. So how do we respond? That's the third part of what I want to talk about. So I think the key things we've got are mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is really designed to halt the problem. And the biggest thing we've got at the moment, of course, is transition to net zero. It's a difficult decision. It costs so much money. It's causing a lot of angst around the world, but we know if we don't go to that, we're going to have all these other issues that will continue. And we've seen what happens in the past when we've got the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has at the same level we've got, sea levels are much higher and it's much hotter. So that's one thing. That's a global response. More at a industry level and at a destination level, we've got adaptation, which is a process of adjusting to the impacts of climate change. And so that includes both the current and expected future impacts. And that's really to avoid or moderate harm to humans. So we've got this overarching thing of mitigation, which is very difficult for us to participate in other than what governments tell us to do. We've then got adaptation, which is much more how we respond. And when we talk about adaptation, I think it's really worthwhile having a look at how do we do this? I think it requires building resilience. So how do we prepare our destinations, our companies, even ourselves for these coming issues with climate change? Being informed. And I think that's one of the key things. A number of speakers have talked about being informed. Richard was talking about the information that you need so you can decide what you're going to do. That then cascades into being prepared to innovate. So the past solutions, Nancy was talking about some of those things. Jeff was talking about innovation in how we deal with fires. So I think this idea of innovation, the old is not necessarily the present or the future. We need to innovate. I think we need to be prepared to adopt new business models, and Nancy was talking about that, new management models of fire, all the other sorts of things of dealing with disasters, and also, interestingly, undertaking research. I think as a researcher, that's one of the key things. The book that we've produced is an interesting one. We've got a group of research chapters, but we've also got a group of people who've very kindly contributed their knowledge, having worked in the industry. So it's one of these, I think, unique academic books that not just talks about theory, but it also talks about practice and the people actually do the stuff. So I think that's a very neat thing that we need to do. Researchers have to talk to the people in the field. People in the field need to talk to researchers. So in areas subject to fire, for example, this may require new building codes, and something that I think Jeff alluded to, new building materials and techniques, abandonment of some areas, unfortunately, and that's really going to happen in the future, particularly in coastal areas. We're going to have to abandon whole cities and move them, and also new fire management regimes when we're looking at the fire. So very briefly, I hope I've looked at what climate change is. There's two types: what it does, some of the things that we're going to expect, and also how do we respond to it. So thank you very much.
Okay, Bruce, thank you very much. I think we may, what we might do is keep questions perhaps towards the end, and we'll move to our next speaker, who comes from Japan, Masato Takamatsu. It's very interesting. We've got two speakers with Masato and with Richard Gordon, who came before. Richard, of course, and Masato were pioneers in the area of the integration of emergency management in tourism. And in fact, when the UN World Tourism Organization ran its first conference on this, Masato and Richard were the two keynote speakers. And it's wonderful, Masato, to have you. I've had the privilege of seeing you in action in Okinawa, and the incredible work that you did there to work with the prefectural government of Okinawa. You're going to talk about a project which is also very exciting in the Mount Fuji area. It's a real pleasure to have you. And without further ado, I'm going to mute myself and let you take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. And well, it's such an honor to be invited to speak to with all these experts in the tourism resilience. Today, I'm gonna share with you a case of the preparedness initiated by private sector in Mount Fuji Five Lakes area in Japan. And oftentimes the resilience or the crisis management is the area of the public sector, but in reality, the only private sector, the service providers are on site to save the safety, to ensure the safety of the visitors as well as the continuation of the business on site. So let's see what they have done here. Oops, sorry, I need to.
Oh, okay, my apology. I have to get you. Okay, there we go.
All right. Do you have my?
We were able to see it and it disappeared.
Okay, I'll try it again.
There we go.
Okay, okay, good. You got the slideshow now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, this is a case of the Fuji Five Lakes Tourism Federation. And as you may know, the Mount Fuji is one of the symbol of tourism in Japan. And there are beautiful lake areas surrounding Mount Fuji, which is right here. And this area is located about 100 kilometers from downtown Tokyo, or maybe 2 hours drive or a train ride from Tokyo. And the area attracts 60 million visitors in 2019. Now, that's before the pandemic. And amongst them, there are 4.9 million overnight visitors, and also 1.3 million visitors are international visitors. And even though this is the beautiful, fantastic destination for the tourists, but this area is also prone to multiple natural hazards, including volcanic activities by Mount Fuji, or earthquakes, and typhoons, floods, and heavy snowfalls. And if those happens, there's a significant impacts to the visitors, including the physical impacts like injury or even death, or transport difficulties. Once there is the natural hazard taking place, occurring, the trains operation will be suspended and the roads closed. So there is many visitors at a risk of being stranded within the destination. And at the time, maybe they would experience a communication difficulty. The cell phones will be down because, well, very much restricted, so that they can't make a communication with other people or get necessary information. And it is very likely that they will experience power outage. And in such a case, there is a consequence of quite a different.
Masato, can I just let you know that your slides aren't moving, so that
it's not moving?
Yeah, I think you need to just go to the next to this slide to which you were talking to. For some reason, the slideshow isn't
okay.
moving. Sorry.
Is it now moving now?
No, it's still the first slide.
Oh.
If you click on the left side, if you click on the second slide on your computer, it should bring it to the second one.
Is it now moving? No.
No.
Okay, it's moving on my side.
If you go click on page down on your computer keyboard, it should also bring it down.
Okay, I'll try it again. Let's see.
Okay.
You see it now?
Yes.
Yep.
Now we see it. Wonderful.
Okay. Sorry. I was talking about, I was showing this map, Mount Fuji and distance from the downtown Tokyo.
Right.
Okay. Do you get the third slide now?
The Fuji Five Lake Tourism Federation. Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right. Having observed this, risks at the destination, the private sector is fully 100% private sector. The Fuji Five Lakes Tourism Federation, they decided to prepare for the potential disasters as a whole destination, and this private sector organization took the initiative in developing a crisis management manual for the tourism service providers and operators. And interestingly, they got the initiative, and they have the fund to develop this manual, and they invited the local municipalities to participate in a working team. So usually we call a public-private partnership, but in this case, it's a private-public partnership. And as Peter, shared with us, this federation, through the workshop, they identify the disaster risks in the area that need to be prioritized. And their priority is number one, eruption of Mount Fuji, followed by earthquake, heavy snowfall, typhoon, and heavy rainfall. And on the right-hand side is the structure of the working team. So as I explained earlier, it's basically formulated by the Fuji Five Lakes Tourism Federation private sector, and together with the local city government, both tourism department as well as the disaster prevention departments. And they also invited the prefectural government agencies for the consultation and advice. And another thing is that they worked with the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. They contributed in printing the manual and distribution of the manual to the CCI members, who are mostly the tourism-related business people. And this is the tourism crisis response manual developed by this federation. And there are 6 sections, including analysis of risk facing the tourism sector, and then in response to volcanic activities, and then earthquake. And section 4 illustrates the procedures for the typhoon, heavy rainfall, and heavy snowfall. And then section 5 suggested measures to assist stranded visitors to return home. As I said earlier, there's a high risk of the visitors to be stranded when there's a major crisis takes place. And also, they have another section to outline support for international visitors who are more likely to be, troubled and have experienced inconvenience being caught up in a disaster event. So my conclusion is development of the Fuji Five Lakes Tourism Federation Tourism Crisis Response Manual was a successful example of the private and public collaboration. And that is to improve the preparedness of the area's tourism sector for responding to potential disaster risks. And today, our heart is with the Maui and the entire state of Hawaii, but anything that can happen to any of the destinations in the world. So I would be more than happy if this manual is small and reference to other destinations in the world. And I'm very much sure that it's a small step, but a meaningful step forward to make the destinations in the world safer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thanks for getting up so early. It's quite early in Tokyo still now. Now you can have your.
It's already 7 o'clock in the morning.
But when you joined us and you've been there from the very beginning, I've seen this and this is wonderful. and from here we go to another gentleman who's a good friend, and he's also in a country where it's like 3 or something in the morning now, in Nepal.
I'm just wondering what happened to Peter Simone, actually.
Okay, Peter is not on, so I thought we were just going to go to Pankaj, and if he comes.
No, that's fine. That's perfectly good.
Okay, but let me get him on there. And Pankaj has been involved also in World Tourism Network from the very beginning. Actually, we're announcing our chapter in Nepal next week, and he will be leading our chapter. So we're very excited about this, together with Deepak Joshi. And Deepak was the former head of the Nepal Tourism Board. So let me try to get Pankaj in the spotlight here somehow. Add to spotlight. There we go. And welcome, Pankaj. I know exactly where you are because I visited you not too long ago. And Kathmandu, I have to say, has changed over the years, and it's very progressive. A lot of trendy places to go, and it's lovely as always. Good to see you, Pankaj. The floor is yours.
Aloha. Good morning, good evening. Well, it's truly an experience. Thank you, Dr. David.
It's a pleasure. Pankaj, do you want to share screen at all? Because
yes.
I know you've got a presentation.
Sure.
Or do you want me to pull up your presentation?
Well, I would do it myself.
But I prefer, much better that you do it because you do it better than I will.
I hope my screen is visible.
Yep, it is.
Thank you, Dr. David and Thomas. Namaste, everyone from Nepal. Well, I'm exactly at 1,300 meters, but as you know, the country that starts from almost 60 meters goes up to 8,849 meters. I'm not an expert, not even I have much expertise in this area of crisis or natural disaster, but being in tourism and having gone through various natural disasters, to name one which we had to face, severe one was 2015 earthquake. So I can relate to what you've gone through, whether it's fire, in Hawaii or Maui, or in Australia, in Canada, floods. This is not unusual. And as David explained, I've been in tourism, and now we're going to start the Nepal chapter of WTN this weekend. Let me share my ignorance. Basically, why I'm up early in the morning here is to discover my ignorance, what I don't know. And perhaps I can borrow the words of Socrates. I don't know what I know, but I definitely know what I don't know. And that's why I'm here. So let me take you back to 2015. This is something Nepal is known for. Yes, it is changing pretty fast, and the contemporary Nepal is pretty cosmopolitan, but this is 2015 when the earthquake struck, and the most, even Kathmandu, the old part, this is Bhaktapur. And then this journalist was blown out because the lady was not sad and depressed because she lost her house, but she was particularly concerned that she didn't have much food to offer to the journalist who came to visit her house. All right. So this is a very different level of resiliency that the people in the Himalayan region have shown time and again, but it does not mean that the people who travel, who visit Nepal or the Himalayan region for that matter, will also, demonstrate similar level of resiliency. So as a tourism operating sector or as a tour operator, and we've been specializing, or we've been learning how to cater to the people with disabilities. In that regard, the preparedness would be the key. And I really enjoyed what Masato-san just shared in the mountain area in Japan. Perhaps we need to learn more. Let me give you a brief, overview. It's not only for people who come here, normally allocentric travelers who take quite good amount of risk, and then they come prepared when they come for, going to the base camp of Mount Everest or Annapurna, or those who go to climb Everest, right? So their level of resilience should be much higher. But as we have also opened tourism for people with disability, as an I had great honor to contribute to the article with Dr. David back in 2018. So when we did quite a few trekking and then, adventure for persons with disabilities or people who have special needs. So can we nurture this domain of tourism, and with the right kind of awareness and preparedness? And I must say that we are learning the ropes, right? So we did organize treks, even in the high Himalaya for amputees from the US. We named it Wounded Heroes Trek of Hope. That was 2016. That became World Tourism Day event also. And we did organize trips to Tibet, or the ride in the base of Everest to this Australian lady, or even the awareness for persons with disabilities, friends with disabilities in Nepal, in Kathmandu. We organize. But the one thing that before this session, what I was not really aware, or I was aware, but I was not really prepared, I must admit, was the crisis management. What if something goes wrong while we organize the trip, or in that trip itself? Yes, even the former president, or the captain regent Mirko Tomasoni, rolling his wheelchair in Lumbini, birthplace of Lord Buddha in Lumbini. But we were lucky that so far all the trips went very well without much to handle in terms of crisis. But it's good to be safe than sorry. So the discussions, what I have, gathered and what we can learn. So it's not only, my mentor, Dr. Scott Rains from California. So they did quite a few adventure. That was back in 2014, right? And recently, this place where I was ago, Thomas, if you recall, while you were in Kathmandu, I was heading up in the Trans-Himalayan trip to Mustang. And this is the gateway to Upper Mustang. When I was there, it was absolutely stunning, beautiful mountain. And after last month, there was a huge, flood, which is quite unusual. This is the rain shadow area, not affected by monsoon, but there was a massive flood that affected the entire, this mountain gateway down to Mustang. So the preparedness and crisis for travelers, and especially persons with disabilities. Of course, we are prone to earthquake as it comes in seismic zone, and it did. A major one happened in 2015. Flood. That is every year we come across, normally in the southern belt, Chitwan, where people go for wildlife, safari, landslide, which is absolutely normal, which we don't panic because we have been seeing it on a regular basis. So people are, I would say, rather more prepared. Fire, well, in Nepali context, fire is not that very much feared because it's not, we don't have bushfire much except in the hills, but that can be real fatal when it happens. So our preparedness towards fire perhaps is not more than fire, extinguishers we put in the building as per the building code. And epidemic or pandemic, when it strikes or when it happens, how do we prepare? Keeping in mind that people with disabilities. So I would say, we're still learning the ropes, and the preparedness that we need to focus on as a tourism operating sector, or as an individual who look after people around you. So knowing the risk, many a times this can be the major hurdle because we do not admit. And in our part of the world, since we believe in good karma or bad karma at times, that you don't really think that, you did bad karma in the past and all these disasters are the outcome of your bad karma. So perhaps this is the time that we know that the risk is very potent and this can strike without much alarm bell. So being prepared or knowing that there's a risk would help. And planning, yes, now I would see a lot of people or organizations working, doing the regular drills. So they don't panic when it strikes, as we can learn from Japan, which have shown resiliency and backed by the proper preparedness. So perhaps, WTN can also create this platform where we can collaborate, not only Dr. Peter Tarlow, who has been, really a great resource, but Masato-san and other practitioners who can, share the knowledge and grow this, preparedness and getting help. Perhaps, we are too shy to ask for help, because asking for help is not the sign of weakness, rather a sign of strength. And in our part, emergency kit or right special need, evacuation. But I must share, after the pandemic, the evacuation of people, Nepal has demonstrated pretty empathetic, approach, because it did offer food, accommodation. Nepal Tourism Board was quite, proactive in that regard. So evacuation in, the state of pandemic or earthquake or major natural disaster, this evacuation part has been quite swiftly handled. And the awareness, the kind of disability, it's not only mobility impairment or visual impairment, hearing, non-visible, PTSD, but seniors. And we have seen the growth of people who travel to Nepal, retired, slow walkers. I hope that's not my timing. I went 2 minutes. Slow walkers, so especially the senior citizens who are traveling to Nepal, their evacuation and crisis management plan should be different than the people who are allocentric and come with a lot of preparedness to, face the adventure. So the growing soft adventure takers, we need to have. So my objective to be awake is to learn and perhaps get more insights and help in this regard. This is one thing where even eTurbo News was a partner back in 2015, 16, because after the earthquake, people were provided with food, shelter, but they were pretty much going through PTSD, had nothing much to do. So we organize a trip, which is in the outskirts of Kathmandu, taking them out to a botanical garden. And I realized that many of them had never been to that botanical garden. So we named it, tourism as a healer. So when crisis happens, yes, you respond immediately, but post-crisis, perhaps tourism can work even much better to help people come out of that trauma or that, pain. This is an example what was organized, not much with long, planning, but it turned out to be a real eye-opener to us. So this is a few glimpses of that. And this I would particularly add, that was December last year. And you'll see a person with this, sunglass. He is a person with disability, but has been working, focusing on disaster management, right? So we invited him to speak on World International Day of Persons with Disability. And we are connecting to the dots between tourism and, disability, right, or tourism for all. And then that was the first time about 8 months ago, I came to learn when he was given a floor to speak that how much preparedness for crisis is important, emergency preparedness guide. That's what he said. And I came to know that Nepal government has already released one dossier or document. So at least we have started to crawl, and we can walk and move towards that direction. So this is what of the very same trip. So I come to an end. So my simple, it's good to be safe than sorry. And we in the Himalayan region are learning the ropes. So we are yet to go a long distance, but we are ready to ready to learn and share this to make our trips, safer for all. So tourism for all with much safety guidelines and practices. So on that note, I would like to thank Dr. David for organizing this, Thomas, Dr. Tarlo. Namaste.
Thank you very much, Pankaj. And there is what I wanted to mention, a lot of history between World Tourism Network and of course also my eTurbo News and Nepal. World Tourism Network was really started in Berlin. I mentioned this in the beginning on the sideline of ITB. And the reason we were early in Berlin was because we organized the Nepal event on the sideline of the ITB, what we have done for a few years. And so Nepal was part and is a founding member. And this is together with PATA, who pitched in and said, we need to have a discussion on tourism. So when World Tourism Network started as the Rebuilding Travel discussion, it was Nepal, it was Nepal Tourism Board, it was PATA and the African Tourism Board we worked with from the very beginning. And we did have Peter Simon, the chairman of PATA, as a guest, but he must have had another priority, and I don't see.
I think he finished up. He was traveling between Macau and Bangkok, so maybe he's disappeared in transit somewhere. But look,
that's another example of when you travel, you have the fourth category of risk.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, Peter,
will be terrible.
Well, we announced yesterday, for those that don't know this yet, but PATA has a new chairman. And of course, that was Peter's job to announce it. And what he did, I believe, yesterday is Mr. Noor from Malaysia, who has been in the convention business. So I know he has a lot going on. And we're very proud to work also as a partner with PATA Indonesia and our chapter at WTN Indonesia. We will all be at our time 2023 next week, a week from literally on the 29th, so 10 days from today. But David, maybe you can conclude this event, and then we can maybe have a few minutes for Q&A.
Well, what I was going to do is do the sum up session, if that's okay. So I just wanted to share screen. Hang on, share screen. This is the last session. I'm going to try and keep it very, very brief and just summarize what we've covered today. I'm sorry that Peter Simone's unable to be here, but I just say this about PATA, because I've done a lot of work with PATA. I know our speaker Bert Van Waldbeek's done a lot of work with PATA over the years, and I will say this about PATA. For the last 30 years, they have been, of all the major transnational tourism organisations, they have been probably the leaders in dealing with tourism risk, crisis and recovery. They were brilliant during SARS in 2003. They were outstanding certainly during the Indian Ocean tsunami, in fact, a lot quicker than the UN World Tourism Organization. So I was actually at the UNWTO's emergency response to the tsunami, which took place a month after the tsunami. PATA, by contrast, was already up and running and doing things the day after it actually happened. Anyway, so enough of that particular thing. But I just wanted to give you just a quick recap of what our speakers have done. That's a bit naughty. Oh, here we go. Okay, so a little quick recap. So Jürgen started off, Steinmetz obviously started off talking about the situation in Hawaii and how I think the Hawaiian Tourism Authority is starting to come to grips with the Maui crisis. Aaron talked about the very important thing. Aaron Ketter, who was our first speaker after Jürgen, talked about the need for destinations to re-image after a crisis. So sometimes if you've had places which have been very badly damaged going through repairs, there is an opportunity. And I used to teach a subject called managing risk and opportunity, because there is an opportunity to re-image and to recast and to re-emphasize a destination after a crisis. Bert talked about the importance of managing media and of course, very much doing so on all platforms. Richard Gordon from the Centre of Disaster Management at Bournemouth University did a fantastic presentation. And I know his organisation has done brilliant work in training governments, tourism organisations, airlines, you name it, in dealing with crisis events, mainly by preparing them for it and certainly engaging in a lot of simulation games, drills, and all of those things. In other words, there's no point just having a crisis manual if you can't actually put it into operation. Then we had the excellent presentation from Charles Goudeni from Washington, DC, who talked about interoperability. Now, that's a really important concept, because interoperability is the ability of different elements of emergency management to actually coalesce seamlessly. And that's really difficult to do. Bill Furs followed, obviously, by talking about the military role in that. And one of the interesting challenges that comes into the military side of it is, who's the boss? The military or the civilian emergency management agencies? Usually, in many, many cases, the military do take precedence simply because they have much superior equipment in dealing with recovery and emergency management arrangements. Then we had, of course, President Peter, Dr. Peter Tallo, talking about and just explaining to us what the concept of risk is. And it's really important. You know, we talk about risk, we talk about crisis. Peter covered very, very well what those concepts are. And one thing I know in a lot of my own research, which I really respect Peter in, is basically talking about the concept of anomie, that a tourist that goes to a place which they're not familiar with can often get very, very panicked and feel very strange, particularly when things are going wrong. That was a really good point that Peter made in his presentation. Unfortunately, we didn't get to hear from Professor Lloyd Waller in Jamaica, so I don't know what he was going to say because I never saw it. Ansi Gamage, it was great to have Ansi as one of the people who has done a lot of work in the area of bushfire management. And she talked about the very important HR dimension. Are staff trained? Are management trained? Are people able to know what to do particularly when a fire event occurs? These are really important parts of staff training. In Australia, certainly now it is a legal requirement for every member of staff of any organisation working in any area in Australia, and this is particularly so for tourism and hotels and attractions, to know what fire drills are. Then we had Jeff Wilkes doing again, excellent presentation. Jeff is a real expert on the area of preparation. And I think one of the interesting things about Jeff's presentation was showing up the technology now, which is available to certainly look for fires, check for fires, see if the conditions are there. But at the end of the day, of course, all of that detection ability is only as good as somebody who can actually hold a hose and put out the fire. Bruce Prideaux talked with, I think, great authority about the issue of climate change. And I was really glad to hear from the presentation that Bruce made, the recognition of both natural and anthropogenic, I hope I get that right, climate change. Certainly, we human beings are responsible for a very, very significant enhancement of climate change, and certainly we haven't done the environment a great deal of good. But I think it is a good thing that we're getting a lot more recognition. Then we had Masato from Japan. The project that Masato is doing with the Fuji 5 Lakes is fascinating because he's combining community needs, tourism industry needs, emergency management needs, government needs in actually planning and preparing for crises. And I think one thing that I incredibly admire about Japan, I look at Japan as the gold standard of risk and crisis management. They take it very seriously because, of course, Japan is vulnerable to practically every crisis that's ever existed. As I said with Peter, it's a pity that he wasn't here, but Peter has done extraordinarily good work in the area of risk and crisis management, and for Parter and Parter, of course, as an organisation has done it. I was delighted that we had Pankaj talk about the very important issue of disabled travellers, and one thing which a lot of us probably don't recognise: 1 in 10 travellers in the world have a disability. It not either a permanent disability or sometimes a temporary disability. And how do we work with those people when emergencies occur? We talk about evacuations. So when we talk about evacuations, it's not just the ability to run. We might need to help people who are in a wheelchair. Okay, I will then move to my next one. Okay, very, very quickly. Couple of things that I thought might come out of the conference. These are resolutions that I'm suggesting, which could be taken to the Bali conference that World Tourism, WTN is going, World Tourism Network. So I guess essentially we're looking at a number of things. Firstly, I think all of us who have been involved in this particular webinar, we want to express our solidarity with the victims of all national disasters, and particularly as tourism professionals, we want to make sure that we can support affected communities. We also want to express our support for the military and civilian first responders, emergency management agencies, etc., because they play such a critical role. And really, as quite a lot of our speakers have actually mentioned, we want to work with these organisations. I think we, as tourism professionals, we need to pledge to enhance our risk management and crisis readiness. Then we also commit to developing risk management protocols. Now, the airlines and cruise ships, for example, have got extensive protocols of risk management. Some other sectors of the industry are still in the catch-up mode. That still applies to hotels, sometimes to attractions. We aim for a tourism infrastructure to be regarded as assets to the host community. And one of the interesting things that came out of Maui in particular was the fact that there seemed to be some competition between local needs and needs of resorts. And that's something which we have to look at not only in the Hawaiian context, but globally. And finally, as tourism destinations, we're committed to building destinations back better after natural disasters. So it's not just a matter of getting things back to where they were, it's a matter of enhancing things. So we certainly hope that all of us have learnt lessons from natural disasters. I'm not here to criticise what happened in Maui or in Hawaii, because I think always every country in the world or every destination in the world hopefully will learn from the experiences that they've had. Okay, so folks, it's goodbye from me. I just wanted to say a very sincere thank you to the World Tourism Network and to eTurbo News for agreeing to host this. I also want to thank the fantastic quality of my fellow speakers here today. It's been wonderful. I'm delighted that quite a number of people have been involved in the book that Bruce and I are co-editing. There's 42 of us from 9 countries. So we certainly, and I'm really delighted that 6 of them have spoken today. So we've had Ansi, Masato, Bert, Richard Gordon. So it's been really terrific. So thank you very, very much indeed. And I'll hand back to Jürgen. And Jürgen, thank you very much for doing such a wonderful job as our chef de mission, so to speak.
No, David, the thank you really goes to you, because you have been the driving force behind this event. I know you've worked extremely hard. You invited almost all our participants here, so you did tremendous, and we should do this a lot more often. And that's what World Tourism Network is about. It's only as good as our members, such as yourself are, and such Pankai and everyone else. So I encourage everyone here who is not a member yet for World Tourism Network, and everyone watching us now to join us. If you're watching us live on eTurbo News or on one of our other publications or partners now, then you may want to come back later, because we're going to repeat this. You will find it on our YouTube and social media channels, on Vimeo, and also on the Breaking News show. So there will be a lot more to come, and anyone who wanted to contribute to the result of this discussion or add to this discussion, you're welcome to do this. Just go to our website, wtn.travel, and click on contact, and we would love to work with everyone here. Now, we have maybe a few more minutes. If anyone has any questions, we still have a lot of the participants here. And that's also quite amazing, because it's 2.5 hours. And
yes, it's pretty long.
So thank you for all of this. And I'm wondering if anyone has any question. We're not that many people here live, so just unmute yourself and you're welcome to ask your question.
Thank you, Jagan. I'm Lucky Chetri from Nepal. I have a question because I'm listening from the beginning. It started from the midnight, but I'm patiently listening this all, and I like to congratulate to everybody. You have done a really great presentation. It is really great. So I have a question, because I'm also very much concerned on the climate change and this all, because we are working in trekking in the Himalayas, and this is becoming a big threat for Nepal and the people who are working on this area. So I am just wanted to know, like we know what the effect is going on all over, but what are the things that we should do to prevent these or to minimize, or is there anything that we can do something on it, we don't know what to do on it, we are all really worried on this, because the Pankaj has been showed that recently in the Annapurna region there was unusual flood was there, and 2 years back in Manang areas and many areas is going on like this, and we have to be very careful on it. So I really like to know any solution people may have to share here and to learn from you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if anyone wanted to comment on this, and of course, lucky as this is a situation the whole world is talking about, and everyone is trying to find solution, especially right now ongoing in New York. I know the conference on climate change has widely support. Our governor here in Hawaii was actually one of the speakers and emphasized the emergency of climate change, and that all falls into travel and tourism. So there's a lot of people talking. And we're in the process of having an interest group and starting a discussion under the leadership of Professor Jeffrey Lipman, many of you know, in Brussels. And he's working on with SunX. It's funded by the Malta government. And what we do in Bali at our upcoming summit is introducing a climate-friendly travel club. So I don't want to give all the information out yet, because we're going to be announcing it, but every organization, including ourselves, PATA, UNWTO, WTTC, and governments around the world are, I think, by now aware of this issue and working on it. But if anyone wanted to add something from the audience, please.
Could I make a suggestion? I think Bruce might be best qualified, and Jeff as well too, to answer that question if you wanted to, Bruce.
I didn't really get the question. Unfortunately, the sound wasn't very good.
So, I think she was asking really about the impact, about what Nepal could do, or what Nepalese businesses can do about climate change.
Okay, look, it's interesting. It's a global thing. At a local level, we can do a whole bunch of things. It really has to be adaptation. We can't stop climate change ourselves in a destination. It's a global thing, so it needs global leadership to do that. At the local level, I think we've got to use science to understand what's happening. So we've got to look at what happens with weather, what happens with ecosystems, and so on. We need to spend a lot of time, and we do that here in Cairns. I've been on a number of committees with the Great Barrier Reef, and also with the Wet Tropics Management Authority, who look after the World Heritage Area, understanding what happens as climate change goes on, looking at, for example, in the rainforest, what do we do for fire regimes, how we can cope with that. We've got invasive species, so how can we control that? So I think at the local level, the first thing is knowledge. When you understand the knowledge of what's happening, you can then do some mitigation, you can do some management. So I think knowledge is the key. You need to get the science there, you need to understand what's happening. Then you need to do the basically resilience and also adaptation. I think they're the two things that you need to look at. Hope that helps.
Right. And in the tourism industry, I can share that much, but I'm part of a committee, what is right now funded by the government of Saudi Arabia and the Ministry of Tourism in Saudi Arabia, what deals in global climate change, the effect on tourism. And there will be a big announcement probably by later this year or the beginning of next year. And I can tell you, I cannot give you names, but the people that are on my committee, there are 20 some of us, these are high-level people, including heads of states, ministers of tourism, and people that have influence in the world. And the Saudi government is ready to finance this with an enormous amount of money for the first 5 years, and is hoping that other governments and organizations go in there. So there is movement on this field. There is powerful movement. It takes the money and the determination to do that. And I think we're all getting to the determination. The money is probably the issue most of governments are facing, specifically if you have a situation like we have here in Hawaii. Money is not everywhere, and it's needed to fight this threat. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, we come to an end. It's been 2 hours and 45 minutes, and it's wonderful. Thank you for everyone to have joined us. And again, if you wanted to, I will send everyone who registered a copy of this presentation so you can play it on your own computer. But as I said, it will also be on our YouTube channel, and we will repeat it on our publications. We make it available to our media partners around the world. I see one of our latest members here is actually on board with us, and I'm very happy to have her, Alison Schaefer. She is probably one of the most known writers here in Maui for the Honolulu Advertisers, and absolutely excellent. And you've been here from the very beginning. Thank you so much, Alison, for being here. So we need friends like this to spread the word. And we're doing our best. And if you wanted to meet us in person, we'll be not only at our summit in Bali, of course, September 29th and 30th. We'll be in Jakarta on the 1st, 4th of October. We'll be in Sri Lanka on, I believe it's the 5th of October. And then in Germany, before attending IMEX, we're going to be exhibiting at IMEX Las Vegas. What is, I believe, from the 6th to the 10th of October, and that is followed by the World Travel Market in London. So if you wanted to meet some of us in person, I will be at all these events because that's all I remember. But we have other people from our team attending as well. I wanted to say thank you, mahalo, as we say in Hawaii, danke, as in my home country, Germany. And again, David, you've been the driving force behind it. Thank you, Peter, for being part of this event.
Okay.
Peter wants the last word. I know that, so go ahead.
No, I think David should have had the last word on this one, but I do want to thank everyone for having attended. And I think that what's true knowledge comes when you raise questions more than answers. So hopefully this seminar was able to help many of us to raise some very important questions. So thank you, David. Thank you, Jürgen. Thank you, everyone, who stayed on. This has been a very long session.
It has.
Yeah,
yes. But it's been good. And I'd just also like to say thank you very much to our brilliant speakers. They really were very, very, very good. And hopefully, you know, be worth people listening to them, even if they weren't here today. So thank you very, very much. For those who got up early in the morning, late at night, or at comfortable times in the day, for all you lovely Americans, it was good.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.